Amara Thompson had always known the weight of prejudice, but nothing prepared her for the moment she walked into the precinct as the new captain, only to face the same officers who once humiliated her. What unfolded was a clash of power, redemption, and undeniable truth that left everyone stunned. Amara Thompson grew up in a modest neighborhood in Atlanta where the hum of the city was both a comfort and a challenge. Her parents, hardworking immigrants from Jamaica, instilled in her a relentless drive to succeed despite the odds stacked against her. As a Black woman, she faced skepticism early on, teachers who underestimated her, peers who mocked her accent, and a world that often seemed to demand she prove her worth twice over. But Amara was no stranger to resilience. She excelled in school, earned a degree in criminal justice from Howard University, and climbed the ranks of law enforcement with a quiet determination that unnerved those who doubted her. Her career began as a patrol officer in a mid-sized Georgia city, where she quickly learned the unspoken rules of the precinct. The department was a tight-knit group, but not always for the right reasons. Amara often felt the sting of being the only Black woman in the room, her ideas dismissed, her presence scrutinized. She overheard whispers about her competence, laced with racial undertones, and endured microaggressions disguised as jokes. One incident stood out above the rest, a moment that would sear itself into her memory and fuel her resolve. It was a humid summer evening in 2018, and Amara was responding to a routine call about a disturbance at a local bar. She arrived to find two officers already on the scene, Officers Daniel Harris and Michael Reed, both white, both known for their brash attitudes. The situation was under control, but as Amara approached, Harris smirked and said, "What's this? Affirmative action on patrol?" Reed chuckled, adding, "Better not mess this up, Thompson. We don't need the department looking bad." The bar's patrons, overhearing the exchange, snickered, and Amara felt her face burn with humiliation. She kept her composure, handled the call professionally, and filed a report later that night, but the incident lingered like a bruise. Harris and Reed's behavior wasn't isolated. Over the next 2 years, Amara faced similar slights, her radio calls ignored, her paperwork lost, her shifts unfairly assigned to the least desirable beats. She reported the incidents to her supervisor, but the response was always the same. "Toughen up, Thompson. That's just how it is." She knew better than to expect change from a system that protected its own, so she focused on what she could control, her performance. Amara studied harder, trained longer, and took every opportunity to prove her worth. She earned commendations for her work in community outreach, defusing tense situations and mentoring younger officers. But the prejudice persisted, a constant undercurrent that tested her patience. In 2020, Amara decided she'd had enough of the toxic environment. She applied for a transfer to a larger department in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she hoped for a fresh start. The move was a risk. She was leaving behind her family and everything familiar, but it paid off. In Charlotte, she found mentors who recognized her potential and a department that, while not perfect, valued her contributions. She rose quickly, moving from patrol to detective, then to sergeant, and eventually to lieutenant. Her reputation grew as a leader who combined sharp instincts with an unshakable commitment to fairness. She implemented training programs on de-escalation and worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between the police and marginalized communities. Her colleagues respected her, though some still whispered about her fast track to promotion, hinting at tokenism rather than talent. By 2025, Amara's career had reached a turning point. She was offered the role of captain in a troubled precinct back in her home state of Georgia, the same precinct where she'd started her career, where Harris and Reed still worked. The department was under scrutiny after a series of high-profile incidents involving excessive force and racial bias, and the city needed someone with Amara's track record to restore trust. She hesitated, knowing the history she'd face, but the challenge called to her. This was her chance to confront the past and reshape the future. When Amara accepted the position, she knew the road ahead would be rocky. The precinct had a reputation for resistance to change, and she'd heard through the grapevine that Harris and Reed, now senior officers, were still fixtures in the department. She prepared herself mentally, drawing on years of experience and the strength of her convictions. She wasn't returning as the rookie they'd mocked. She was their boss, and she intended to lead with authority. On her first day as captain, Amara walked into the precinct with her head held high. The room fell silent as she entered, her presence commanding attention. She wore a tailored navy suit, her badge gleaming on her chest, and her eyes scanned the faces before her. Some officers nodded respectfully, others stared in curiosity, but a few, Harris and Reed among them, exchanged glances that carried a familiar disdain. Amara noticed but said nothing. She'd learned long ago that actions spoke louder than words. Her first meeting with the team set the tone. Standing at the front of the briefing room, she introduced herself with a calm, steady voice. "I'm Captain Amara Thompson," she began. "Some of you may remember me from my time here as a patrol officer. I've spent the last 7 years working to make law enforcement better, fairer, stronger, and more accountable. That's what I'm here to do now. We have a lot of work ahead, and I expect everyone to step up." The room was quiet, but she could feel the tension. Harris leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. Reed whispered something to the officer next to him, who stifled a laugh. Amara's gaze lingered on them for a moment before moving on. She wasn't here to settle old scores, not yet. Over the next few weeks, Amara began implementing changes. She introduced mandatory bias training, revised use of force protocols, and set up a community advisory board to improve transparency. The pushback was immediate. Harris and Reed led a small but vocal group of officers who grumbled about woke policies and questioned her authority behind her back. During one roll call, Harris openly challenged her, asking why the department needed all this extra paperwork for arrests. Amara responded evenly, explaining how the new protocols protected both officers and civilians. Harris rolled his eyes, but she held his gaze until he looked away. The message was clear. She wasn't intimidated. The turning point came 3 months into her tenure. A high-profile case hit the precinct. A young black man had been arrested after a traffic stop escalated into a physical altercation. The incident was caught on body cameras, and the footage showed Harris using excessive force while Reed stood by, doing nothing. The community erupted in protest, and the media descended on the precinct. Amara knew this was a defining moment. She launched an internal investigation, personally reviewing the footage and interviewing witnesses. The evidence was damning, and she recommended disciplinary action, including suspension for both officers pending a full review. The backlash was swift. Harris and Reed rallied their allies, claiming Amara was targeting them unfairly. They filed a grievance with the union, accusing her of bias against white officers. The precinct became a battleground, with loyalties split between those who supported Amara's reforms and those who clung to the old ways. Whispers of her past as a rookie resurfaced, twisted into narratives that painted her as vindictive. But Amara didn't waver. She met with community leaders, listened to their concerns, and promised accountability. She also reached out to the officers who were on the fence, holding one-on-one meetings to explain her vision and earn their trust. The investigation concluded with Harris and Reed facing formal charges of misconduct. At the disciplinary hearing, Amara presented the evidence herself, standing before a panel of department officials and union representatives. She recounted the incident in detail, her voice steady as she described the impact of the officers' actions on the community and the department's reputation. When Harris took the stand, he tried to deflect, claiming the suspect had been aggressive. Amara countered with the body camera footage, which contradicted his account. The panel ruled in favor of suspension without pay, a decision that sent ripples through the precinct. The aftermath was a mix of triumph and tension. Some officers began to see Amara's leadership as a necessary change, while others doubled down on their resentment. Harris and Reed, humiliated by the public reprimand, became more vocal in their defiance. One evening, as Amara was leaving the precinct, she overheard them in the parking lot. "She thinks she's untouchable now," Harris muttered. "Let's see how long she lasts." Reed laughed, adding, This place was better before she showed up. Amara paused, her hand on her car door, but chose not to confront them. Instead, she made a mental note to keep a closer eye on their actions. As the months passed, Amara's reforms began to take root. Community trust improved, with fewer complaints about police misconduct. The precinct's clearance rate for violent crimes rose, thanks to her emphasis on better training and resource allocation. She mentored younger officers, particularly those from underrepresented groups, and created a culture where accountability was non-negotiable. But the shadow of Harris and Reed lingered. They continued to undermine her, spreading rumors and challenging her decisions at every turn. Amara knew she couldn't let their behavior slide indefinitely. The final confrontation came during a department-wide training session on community policing. Amara had invited a local activist group to speak, hoping to foster dialogue between officers and the people they served. Harris and Reed attended reluctantly, their body language radiating hostility. When one of the activists criticized the department's history of racial bias, Harris interrupted, saying, "Maybe if people followed the law, we wouldn't have these problems." The room tensed, and Amara stepped in. "Officer Harris," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, "your job is to protect and serve, not to make excuses. If you can't handle that, you're in the wrong profession." The room erupted in murmurs, and Harris's face reddened. For the first time, he had no retort. After the session, Amara called Harris and Reed into her office. She didn't raise her voice or show anger. She didn't need to. "You've made it clear you don't respect my authority," she said. "That's your choice. But this department is changing, and if you can't adapt, you'll be left behind. I'm giving you one last chance to do your jobs properly. If you step out of line again, you're done." Reed shifted uncomfortably, but Harris stared back, defiant. Amara held his gaze, unflinching, until he looked away. They left her office in silence, the weight of her words hanging heavy. Over the next year, Amara's leadership transformed the precinct. Complaints dropped, morale among most officers improved, and the community began to see the department as a partner rather than an adversary. Harris and Reed eventually transferred to another precinct, unable to keep up with the changes. Amara didn't celebrate their departure. She didn't need to. Their exit was proof that her vision was working. She continued to lead with integrity, proving every day that she was more than capable of rising above the prejudice that had once tried to define her. Amara's story spread beyond the precinct, inspiring others in law enforcement and beyond. She became a sought-after speaker, sharing her experiences at conferences and training programs. Her journey wasn't just about overcoming racism, it was about rewriting the rules of leadership in a system resistant to change. She never forgot the sting of those early days, but she used it as fuel to create a better future, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in justice.